Hello, and thank you for joining us for our podcast from Xactly. This podcast will be focused on 2024 predictions, 2024 and beyond. I'm Jason Rothbaum, and I'm the practice lead of the transformation team. I'm joined by Eric Embir. Eric has 17 years of performance management experience and leads the Xactly product strategy function. He's got a diverse background in product sales and professional services. He's worked with Clary Systems, which was acquired by IBM.
Yep.
Obero, which was also acquired by Xactly. So, in addition to being a very well-versed background in sales and product sales and professional services, he's got a good amount of background in tech consolidations and integrations. Been through your share of M&A. You've been through that sausage factory.
Yep.
You've been with Xactly for over 6 years now. So, Eric, let's open the floor up to you. What are some of your predictions for 2024 and beyond?
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Jason. I'm going to start with the first one. Listen, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I'm sure everybody's saying it. Generative AI is something that I absolutely think is going to be something that we see proliferate the market, something that I think is here to stay. When you think about kind of the impact that generative AI is having in the market today, you see the likes of Salesforce and Microsoft and ServiceNow and all the things that they're doing with generative AI. It is really kind of inspiring, right? The opportunities that are now available, the benefits and the impact that are having to our customers. It's really going to start kind of opening up the floodgates to the opportunities that are now available with this kind of new and compelling technology. That said, again, I do think that we're going to find in 2024 that the appetites and kind of the exposure of generative AI might wane a little bit. Not to say that it won't pick up, but it's going to, kind of it's at its peak of excitement right now. It's going to go through its troughs and kind of pick up again. But I really think that now when solution providers start reevaluate the effectiveness of their generative AI strategies, they're going to start uncovering a lot of things, right?
Right.
And specifically, one of the things that I think is going to be a really like a big eye opener to the solution providers out there is around kind of the considerations post adoption, right? So you deliver features, you deliver the capabilities to the customers, and now it's really kind of doing the retrospective and taking a step back and saying, are these solutions really delivering ROI and value to the customers? And in certain cases with generative AI, which is really much focused on generating content, that's the power of generative AI. That's what it's so good at doing. There are use cases out there where generative AI is a slam dunk, right? There's obvious ROI for customers, and the adoption of it and the impact that it's having on customers is evident and it's compelling. But there are other areas of generative AI where people, vendors, solutions that they brought to market to a certain degree felt a little bit contrived. It was very much a check the box type of thing where it's okay, generative AI is all the hype. How do I bring something to market as quickly as possible so I can check the box? But there's not a lot of conviction behind the features and capabilities. And I think people are going to start to realize that, and customers are really going to start to kind of show their cards in terms of what's actually providing me value versus what was just an attempt to kind of check that box, as I mentioned before. And at the end of the day, customers are really focused on delivering solutions that are going to help them kind of optimize their process, really focus on delivering value. And they'll see through the generative AI that isn't really moving the needle to really, make them successful in their jobs and their jobs to be done. So, that's one area of it.
Well, just to summarize what you're saying, the race was last year to check the box, make it a marketing function so that customers would see that generative AI was included. Now it's going to be much more targeted, which is it's going to, are you saying slow down? It's
So
now
I
going to be, it's much more ROI focused. What is it actually delivering to me?
like there's a lot to think about with generative AI, right? So I have this mentality of the providers that are going to thrive and succeed with generative AI are the ones that take a step back and think about it a little bit more methodically, right? That truly embrace the idea of slowing down to speed up, right? And so when you start thinking about generative AI and more importantly, the nascency of it, right? Like how early it is in terms of its value that it's bringing to market. There's a lot of things that need to still be considered with generative AI. So
Mhm.
there's everything from kind of the evolving regulatory landscape, so making sure that privacy and protection is of utmost importance and your customers' data and their IP is protected at all times. That's something that's still early days. People are going to have to think about how they proprietize kind of their large language models and build it in such a way that they can give confidence to their customers that their data is safe and it's protected. There's ethical considerations around generative AI, making sure that there's no inherent bias in the solutions that are delivered with generative AI, and they're actually working for the customer and they're delivering these unbiased perspectives that are going to allow them to be successful in the use cases that they bring about with it. I think there's going to be global implementation challenges. So you start to expand the horizons and all the touch points of generative AI and all the people that are going to touch globally. There's cultural changes across the globe. There's regulatory changes. There's nuances to business processes that are going to now need to be considered. And then when you start thinking about how you drive kind of scalability in terms of the features that you want to make available through generative AI. So if you think about the AI first mentality is how do you actually do that at scale, right? And do so in a way where it could also drive self-serviceability. So you think about all of those things that I just listed, these are
Mhm.
all up for consideration, right? And so going back to my earlier point, it needs to be methodical in terms of how you approach this from a technology perspective so that you could check all the boxes in these areas and really bring true value, true conviction to the use cases that you're making available through AI. Um,
So
as
we're not at a Skynet moment yet.
No, we are not. No. One of the things when we first started, and listen, generative AI, I almost felt kind of came out of nowhere, right? And when we at Xactly, but then I'm sure every technology vendor went through this experience, had this aha moment that says, well, we need to flip the roadmap. We need to think about what we're doing around generative AI and what we're going to be bringing to market. And so naturally, people are kind of rattling off and brainstorming, collaborating on all the new ways generative AI can kind of bring value to the customers and what are the most enticing kind of marketing opportunities that we have with it. And interestingly enough, and this is something I draw back on quite some time or quite a few times to kind of ground myself in terms of our approach with it. But one of our colleagues sent me a graphic, a visual from the Marketunist, and the quote on it was, "Let's transform our entire business using generative AI I just used to write a poem about my dog." Right. And so there's this concept that, people are allured by all these capabilities and all the fun things that we can do with it and are kind of blindly thinking that they can just apply that in kind of B2B, B2C. It's a completely different kind of world that we operate with. There's so much more complexity and nuance, but we're so blinded by these really kind of interesting and somewhat limitless opportunities that we see with the chat GPTs and the BARTs of the
Mhm.
world. So, something I always look at to kind of ground myself to make sure that we're saying, okay, let's just slow down a little bit here. And this is not the same generative AI that we're writing or using that to kind of write that poem about your dog. You know what I mean?
But
So
it's such a black box. It's the knee-jerk reaction that, oh sure, the generative AI that I just used to write a poem about my dog, uh, sure, I can use that to you know uh, reduce my overhead in this particular area. It's just such a black box, and I imagine that a lot of companies are just jumping headfirst into it.
they are, and I think the market will dictate where it goes, and there's going to be some very obvious successes in terms of the use cases that we use with generative AI and how it's kind of penetrated the market and served the customers. And um,
But there has to be an
there's
ROI, like you said. So you have to prove it You have to show that that generative AI can actually bring value where you're saying it can.
Exactly. And that's going back to my earlier point is like it's still all very nascent, right? To a certain degree,
Mhm.
it's all very nebulous in terms of, how we identify what that ROI is, how we capture, what are the kind of the metrics and the KPIs we're going to use to evaluate what those value drivers are going to be. And I think over the course of the next year and beyond, we're going to start, seeing where there's kind of traction in terms of how it's servicing our customers and in our space. And we'll use that as a learning mechanism to invest more in specific areas and not take more of a broad blanket approach in terms of how we bring these solutions to market. I think there's a lot of opportunity specifically in the sales performance management space that
Mhm.
generative AI is applicable to, right? I think there's low hanging fruit opportunity around data exploration. So I ask the machine a question and it gives me a response back, but it's all done through natural language, right? And it's able to identify insights and mine for the information to give you more predictive, more prescriptive insights. And so I think there's a lot of work that's been done even before generative AI was a thing. There was a lot of investment done in kind of AI and insights to drive more predictability and more prescriptive outcomes. And so we'll see that now surface through more natural language by way of generative AI. And I think that's
Mhm.
again an opportunity for growth and again a low hanging fruit opportunity there. I think there's opportunity for solution configuration, right? Whether we're configuring compensation plans or we're configuring quota models or territory alignment structures. At some point, I think there's going to be a day and age where, the point and click, drag and drop, building out these interfaces, those are going to be antiquated. And now we're going to see generative AI really being the mechanism in which we build these in more natural ways through conversation with the machine and really focused on how we develop models and how we optimize models. And then there's also, another low hanging fruit opportunity around task automation is practitioners are doing repetitive tasks in terms of administering compensation plans, administering territory and quota models. Those are all things that can now be optimized and made more efficient through generative AI. And I think we're going to see kind of an insurgence of use cases around that area in the short term and kind of we'll see what the long-term future holds. But I think those are going to be some areas that are going to be wildly popular for generative AI in our space.
Well, you said, well, let's differentiate it because ICM traditionally is centered on the tactical aspects of things.
Yeah,
Um, and it's it well, being completely selfish because I'm a plan design person predominantly. Do you see generative AI or any sort of advancements in the future year or two around strategic considerations?
absolutely. Right. So that's
Oh,
actually one
that's
of the
you see,
things.
that's not good news for me.
It's not good news for you, but it's well, I shouldn't say that. I do think that the plan designers, the advisors, the consultants of the world, they're here to stay. I think the way organizations liaise with those people are going to shift over time, and I think they're going to be complemented with generative AI, but even more broadly, and this was another point that I was going to speak to was specifically in the sales performance management space. I agree 100%. This is one of the things I think we'll start seeing pop up more and more in the future is this paradigm shift between tactical versus strategic, right? I
Okay.
like to think that ICM has gone through commoditization over the last, let's say, decade or so. So there's a lot of vendors that are now really checking the box on how to create compensation plans, how to administer compensation plans, and it's very much been commoditized over the last several years. And I absolutely think that it's ripe for innovation, ICM itself, not necessarily just through generative AI and through kind of the technologies that support those processes, but broadening the scope in terms of the processes that we support through with incentive compensation. So, what we'll seen over the last several years, we've seen providers expand their horizons into sales performance management. So they've matured from ICM to SPM, incentive compensation to SPM. They're now supporting territory and quota. They're supporting sales planning. They've broadened kind of the aperture, if you will, in terms of the serviceable market that they're focusing on and penetrating. But and that's been kind of a departure from incentive compensation to a degree. But if you take a step back, I think there's a lot of untapped opportunity with more strategic plan design, right? I
Mhm.
think that's something that we're certainly going to see rear its head in 2024 and beyond. And I think there's really an opportunity to really elevate the value proposition that incentive compensation now brings to the table. So, organizations, I think, in my opinion, they're going to move beyond kind of the checkbox mentality and really start embracing more strategic opportunities to drive performance within the organization, to really focus on, I know people say it a lot, but strategic planning is what's going to really enable customers to align their compensation plans to corporate objectives, goals, and objectives, right? And I think strategic plan design is the catalyst to do that.
Right. But when you're talking about plan design, when you're talking about territory quota, you're talking about the whole platform of SPM. You're not dealing with that administrative level anymore. You're dealing with well the C-suite, right? You're dealing with a much more strategic interaction within the company.
It's a whole new set of stakeholders that are at the
Right.
table, right? So you're dealing with the executive stakeholders now, and it goes beyond the executives that cover sales comp, right? You're dealing with
Mhm.
executives from revenue operations, from finance, from HR, people that are sitting in the C-suite, because now you're having conversations that are more intriguing to them. They're less about the value drivers focused on operational efficiencies. Can I automate this thing faster? It's now more focused on value drivers that focus on revenue uplift and cost optimization, right? And so,
Major change coming in the year or the next, because sales ops no longer is going to own that. It's going to be largely a checkbox for a platform, and then they're going to be able to, within the C-suite, just do it.
yeah, yeah. I'm a firm believer. I think this is pretty aspirational to a degree, but I think there's going to come a time where when you think of it from the lens of strategic planning, and when I think of, let me take even a quick step back, because there's one thing I'll acknowledge as well is that when you start elevating the conversation to strategic plan design, there are other tentacles that need to be kind of thought through, right? So when you think about like
Mhm.
fully integrated strategic planning, yes, the plan design is absolutely one of those things that is critical as part of that go-to-market motion, if you will. But when you start thinking about things like capacity planning, coverage planning, territory and quota planning, those are all interwoven into a much broader planning horizon, if you will, right? And so
Mhm.
when we think about strategic planning, we're also thinking about all the upstream considerations as well that have an impact to the downstream, right? And so that's going to be very compelling as well when now there's really all-in-one solution providers that are connecting these otherwise disparate systems and disparate processes that are owned by different stakeholders and bringing them together, and really having them operate in lockstep. Because one of the things, and this kind of leads me to the point that I was going to say, and I think something that's going to hold a lot of influence and hold a lot of power is when we can enable solutions, or deliver solutions that will enable these executive stakeholders to make decisions in the boardroom.
Mhm.
And I'm talking about fast-paced decision making, and really having the full exposure of what certain implications that you have are going to have to your business, whether it's a cost implication, whether it's a resource allocation implication, but being able to make decisions in the boardroom and see what the immediate impact of that almost in real time is going to be an incredibly powerful concept and influential concept that I think we'll see in the future. There's and
What you're saying is blowing my mind because I ran sales ops departments and I would go to the boardroom and I would say, here's the sales plan, here's the forecast, here's the sales size that we need to get it based off of current capacity considerations. And they would come back and they would say, that's too many. We can't afford that. We need to increase productivity. Okay, now we need to increase productivity. How do we do that? Here are the things that we need to do, more training, better technology. Here are the investments. Now are we there? Then you would take that and next sequence.
yeah,
Okay, now we have to do the recruiting. Now we have to do the sales compensation design. We have to do the territory planning. And it just is a sequenced uh, conversation, set series of meetings and
yeah,
analyses. What you're implying here, well, not implying, what you're saying straight out is that's going to be largely automated. And you're going to do what if scenarios with a platform that
yeah.
will do all of that thinking for you.
I think there's a time where we'll get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the things that you just sequenced out, those are going to be administrative tasks that we're going to continue to kind of go through, in more efficient and connected ways. So when we start thinking about streamlining processes, it's absolutely going to exist. But in terms of bringing the executive suite into the conversation and being able to empower them with the tools to be able to make decisions, important decisions, and explain to them what the potential impacts and ramifications of those decisions are in near real time is, I think, something that is going to be incredibly powerful and something that I think is definitely within the realm of possibility, right?
You're getting a lot of consultancies angry by if you innovate that field, yet it's it's a substantial expense that that the companies don't need to incur anymore.
Yeah. And listen, I think there's absolutely a time and place for the consultancies and for the advisors, and
Mm-hmm.
there's almost so much, there's only so much complexity automation can really handle, but I see it very much as an augmentation tool, if nothing else, right? It's, to a degree, I don't necessarily see this as supplanting those advisory engagements as more than it is actually complementing and offering alternative perspectives to it as well.
Well,
Uh,
thank you. I'm sure a lot of my old friends would thank you for saying that.
no, I, no, I, no, I, I truly do believe that that is the case.
Hmm.
One of the things that, I think will drive the success of these endeavors is around the infrastructure in place to be able to support it, right? And what I mean by that is, do you have the right data? Do you have the right benchmarks? Do you have the right expertise purely from just the domain perspective? Do you understand the domain intimately to be able to train your models and solutions and technology to be able to think the way consultants think, right? And so, there needs to be the underlying infrastructure to be able to support these things. And I think those that are well equipped with that uh,
Hmm.
will find opportunities to capitalize on this kind of gold mine that they're sitting on to a degree and deploy them in ways that are far more strategic than traditional ways of thinking today, which are very automation focused. Yes, there's a lot of conversation around elevating conversations around AI and generative AI and machine learning. But again,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, it all comes back to the data that you have to be able to support that, right? And so I find that those that are well equipped with that will find success. And I actually think that the concept is when you think about it from a technology perspective, is future proof as well. Data analytics is only getting stronger. Machine learning and artificial intelligence is only getting stronger. And so all of those are going to be ways to really enhance the predictive and prescriptive capabilities that they're intended to deliver for customers. So exciting times ahead for sure.
Sure. Okay, so we've got those. what other predictions do we have as you prognosticate into your crystal ball?
So another one is around composable applications. So
Okay.
so that's an interesting one. So businesses today, they're becoming ever more complex, they're becoming more sophisticated. There's a
Hmm.
lot of market forces that are causing disruptions and dislocations, and they're challenging organizations to reevaluate their processes that they have internally, right? How do we optimize our processes? How do we um, really ensure that uh, we're operating with adaptability and agility to be able to withstand these kind of prevailing market forces? And I'm at the point now where I'm starting to kind of convince myself that organizations, especially or vendors or solution providers that are focused on growth within their portfolio are constantly always thinking about scalability. I think they're going to find that that's going to be secondary to adaptability and agility, right? And then those are going to be paramount for the solutions that they deliver to market. Uh,
Hmm.
and think about, and I don't know what your perspective is on this, but when you think about ICM and even more broadly SPM, it's very paradoxical in nature. What we find, and through my experiences, is that, as I mentioned earlier, it's extraordinarily complex, not necessarily the comp plans themselves, but
Thank
all
you.
the processes that supports the comp plans, right?
Hmm.
Everything from how you manage territories and quotas, how you manage discretionary processes that involve other stakeholder groups, how you manage the payroll process. All of these things have,
You mean that it's all connected, or that
it's all connected, but
okay.
there's a lot of nuance that needs to be embraced in the peripherals of just your basic, and I say that somewhat cautiously,
Hmm.
I don't mean to deduce compensation plans to just being basic, but once you're able to check the box on the automation of that, there's a lot of complexity that surrounds the administration and the operationalization of a compensation program, right? And so
Hmm.
that becomes very complicated, very complex. Um, and so my point is that it's very paradoxical in nature in the sense that there's a lot of complexity that surrounds us, but at the same time, our customers are demanding simplicity, right? And so they want the utmost flexibility, utmost customizability, but at the same time, they also want it to be as simplistic and easy to use as possible. And there's a middle ground there, right? I absolutely kind of
Hmm.
acknowledge that there is. It's not one or the other. And I'm a big believer in that. But it is interesting to hear, when we speak with customers a lot, with prospects a lot, that's a lot of the narrative that we want. We want all the customization in the world, but I want you to make it dead simple for me to operate, right?
So what's the what's the future solution to this? We want flexibility, we want agility, but we also want simplicity, which seems to be
So,
completely opposite.
yeah. So I feel like this perspective is something that is ever present in the market
Hmm.
today, right? And so that's why I think composable applications, the concept of composable applications is going to start picking up steam and because it's intended to be able to deliver on both ends of the spectrum, right? So when you think about composable applications, it's all around sustainable customization, right? So it's this idea of like decoupling ICM or SPM or whatever playground you play in, right? It doesn't necessarily need
Right.
to be there, but is decoupling from its monolithic state, if you will,
Hmm.
and enabling the composers of the application to bring them together in ways that are more meaningful for them, but in a way that's also intuitive and easy to use, right? So this is everything from decomposing and decoupling down workflows, reports, data integrations. These are all now opportunities for us to find creative ways to restitch them back together into composable platforms to, again, to detach us from these otherwise kind of monolithic states that a lot of solution providers bring to market today, and doing so
Hmm.
in a way that doesn't compromise scalability and doesn't compromise performance. So there's that value add with composable applications, it's intended to be very much user centric as well. So it's really the composers, meaning our customers, our partners that are building these solutions on the platform, are really kind of gatekeepers to their destiny in terms of the solutions that they bring to market and really enabling them to dictate what their experiences are going to look like. And then it
Well,
also,
don't composable black platforms allow those non-technical teams to build and get involved in the process where it was the exclusive playground for skilled programmers before?
so they do, right?
Doesn't that add more complexity to things?
So there's certainly a space for your non-technical business user. I think this is where we'll start to see um, a lot of power in composable applications, and those that choose to deploy it will have success in so much that if they are providers that know how to bring to bear and bring to market best of breed solutions that deploy best practices, those are in and of itself parts of the composable application that can be repurposed and reutilized in ways that are more meaningful for the end user.
Hmm.
So, yes, your business user will still be able to leverage the goodness of prepackaged capabilities to serve them in a way that's more meaningful. So, use them as is. There's years and decades of best practice built into these, and you can't diminish that, right? But there's also an acknowledgement that I can leverage that and I can also extend upon that and I can make that my own in a way that's meaningful for me. And so, what I think we'll also see is this emergence of kind of business fusion teams, right? And this is something that we're starting to see a little bit more and more in the market today, but it's really these teams that are multidisciplined, right? They all
Hmm.
share accountability for specific outcomes, right? So they're very outcomes focused. They're not necessarily focused on traditional business process. And what I mean by that is when you think about these multidisciplinary teams, these are now teams that are um, bringing together stakeholders that integrate technology skills, they integrate analytical capabilities, they integrate business domain expertise, and they bring them together into these fusion teams that serve the greater good for the organization. They all share accountability for one specific outcome, not necessarily the individual traditional business process that a technical person would have otherwise been responsible for, or a analyst would have otherwise been responsible for. They now share kind of the responsibility of the greater good, which is the composed application in this in the context of what we're talking about right now. So I
Hmm.
think there's absolutely a space for your business user being able to deploy, solutions on composable platforms and applications. But more and more, we're also seeing that they're being complemented with other stakeholder groups that can elevate their solutions and capabilities off the backs of these composable applications.
Got it. All right. Um, let's go back to the crystal ball. As you gaze deeply into the mist of the ball, what else do you see happening?
So yeah, the last one, this is a trend that I've seen happening, and one that I think we'll continue to see is around tech consolidations. Um, so in my experience, I see a lot of fragmentation in process, uh,
Hmm.
whether it's within revenue operations, whether it's in finance. It's evident, right? Um,
Sure.
there's a lack of collaboration between the stakeholder groups. There's data inconsistencies. There's process inefficiencies. There's fractures within the organization, within these processes that exist to support the business.
Well, there are
And
entire teams built to reconcile those fractures within the teams.
absolutely, right? And
Yeah.
so yes, there's center of excellences and there's
Yep.
advisory engagements that are exclusively focused on fixing this, but nonetheless, they're evident and they exist. And then on top of that, you start to see pressures coming from the office of the CFO. So a lot of the themes that we've been hearing is around an emphasis around durable growth, efficient growth. So it's kind of um, detaching yourself from the growth at all cost mentality, but now organizations are just being a little bit more conscious of cost and profitability and really emphasizing um, durable growth, right? And so when you think about the fractures that exist within the stakeholder groups, you think about this need to drive efficient and profitable growth, you now have leaders that are really focusing on investing time and investing resources to try to solve and optimize these problems, right? And
Mhm.
they're going through, to your point, they're going through their advisory engagements and they're following the 4-stage maturity curve and they're trying to figure out where they want to be and how they can optimize things. But it's happening. It's been happening for decades. It'll continue to happen for decades longer, right? But solution providers, they're aware of these conversations. I've been in these conversations where, you know, customers are looking to consolidate tech stacks. They're looking to streamline processes, right? And so
Right.
as a result of that, what I think we'll see is solution providers catching on to this, understanding the need to expand their offering in the markets, understanding that leaders want to be able to streamline their operations with all-in-one platforms. And we'll start to see more traction. We're starting to see, we saw it last year, right? In revenue
Mhm.
management space, we're seeing some consolidation in tech over the last few years. We've seen it in the sales performance management space recently. Analysts suggesting that things should be done a specific way. They're hearing it from the voice of the customer, right? So if
Mhm.
you actually take a step back, it's all very predictable to a degree in terms of where the markets are going and the types of solutions that providers want to be able to put in front of their customers. And so what I think is over the next year, 2 years, we'll start to see these very saturated domain spaces start to be redefined, right? There's going to be vendors that are going to emerge as kind of the dominant providers in the space. And let's be honest, you want to be a leader in your domain, in your space, right? I came across something that kind of jumped out at me, and I forget where I had heard it from, but if you think about the cloud infrastructure space on its own, right? It is probably the most saturated space in technology today, right? But who are the three people that you're constantly hearing over and over again? It's Azure,
Yep.
it's AWS, it's Google, right?
Mhm.
So it's important for these solution providers to be recognized as leaders in their space, right? And
Mhm.
if you're not top 3 or top 4, there's challenges with that. And so
Yeah, wait, I want to point out the joke here because what you're talking about is a consolidation of companies' tech stacks leading to a consolidation of tech stack advisors.
sure.
Okay, just thought that was funny.
Yeah, no, but I mean but I think that mentality will to a degree shape the way we see these solution providers kind of attack the market going forward and recognize
Mhm.
the the need to redefine themselves and establish kind of dominance within the space.
So they'll have to be across solutions. They'll
Yeah,
they'll have to okay, so they'll have to be multidisciplined for lack of a better word.
100%. And what's going to be interesting is seeing how it all unfolds, right? I think when you think about the saturation of the market and all the providers that are in there, they all started their offering to the market in one domain space or another, right?
Mhm.
And they're recognizing the need to expand their offering and kind of be the all-in-one provider and integrate these processes into a singular platform. But they all started from different places, and the strategy in terms of where they're ultimately going to end up, they're all going to take their different path and different course. They'll all converge probably, for the most part, to kind of the same endpoint, if you will. But it'll be interesting, and time will tell to see who will be the most successful with the strategies that they deploy. And I think that'll be interesting because you could take a top-down approach with it in terms of how you consolidate your solutions and your processes. And you can, let's say, for example, you're intently focused on the CFO and he is, for all intents and purposes, your customer, and he's the person that you're targeting versus taking a bottom-up approach. And when you're looking at a broader population of users, whether they're analysts or whether they're sales reps, they might be your direct end customer, if you will. And you might take a
Mhm.
top-down approach, or sorry, a bottom-up approach. The question is you'll converge into the same space, but which one of them is going to kind of bear the most fruit at the end of the day? Are you going to be taking your CFO and all of their processes and migrating them onto
Mhm.
the stack that your sales reps are on, or is it going to be vice versa? And who's the one that is going to kind of, I mean, at the end of the day, I have a perspective on what approach I
Well,
would want to take with it, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out and who's going to ultimately making the shifts from one technology to another as part of these broader consolidations.
just my knee-jerk reaction is almost it would depend on who's got the budget at the time.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that
But
could
I
be,
see what you mean. It's
yeah,
there from as an outside advisor, I'm used to just however I can get in, right?
yeah,
But I see what you mean. It's
yeah,
there's going to be probably a playbook out there as to the best way to tackle these types of uh, it- consolidations, tech
yeah.
consolidations,
And I think in our
and
space,
how
it's
to approach
still,
them.
yeah, in our space, I still think is relatively early stage. It's not as pronounced in some of the other industries that we see. So there isn't necessarily kind of a playbook out there. It still remains to be seen what the
Hmm,
most effective strategies are and whose strategies are going to bear the most fruit. But nonetheless, or nevertheless, these strategies I think are going to be deployed in one shape or form or another, right? So
right.
um, that'll be interesting. And talking from experience, because as part of the introduction that you had given me, I've been through two acquisitions, right? And I've seen firsthand the challenges with tech consolidation as well, right? So there's always this honeymoon period, right, where everybody's rah rah and they love the idea, like we have all these new shiny toys to sell, and that comes to a screeching halt very quickly when you start thinking about the challenges that come with integrations. And there are functions and people and groups and teams that are exclusively focused on optimizing integrations when M&A happen. And so there are absolutely companies and
Yeah.
organizations that do this extraordinarily well, right?
Hmm.
But for organizations that are kind of early in their kind of life in terms of the M&A game and bringing on new tech stacks into their environments, there are absolutely some challenges that come with that, mainly around just the lack of unification and delivering kind of consistent and fluid experiences across the platform, which kind of disables them from being able to really offer really interesting and diverse use cases, which was oftentimes the reason they've explored the M&A and the acquisitions to begin with, right? And so I
Hmm.
think what we'll find is that organizations that do a lot of tech consolidations are going to hit a brick wall and realize and say, I need to take a step back and I need to think about my offering to the market a little bit more holistically. I need to think of this as a unified platform. I need to deliver consistent experiences for my customers so they don't feel like they're operating in this Frankenstein of a technology, if you will. And so I
It's a
think
good
we'll
way to
see a
put
lot
it.
of I think we'll see a lot of that as well. I think those that go through tech consolidations are going to go, if you ask me what the next prediction is, well, I could tell you what the next prediction of those vendors are going to be, and it's going to be around the unification of and kind of the cohesiveness of their platform to a certain degree.
Right.
So it'll be interesting. And I think, just to draw back to my earlier point, I think that's where composable applications really is intriguing, right? Because composable applications is really to facilitate innovation at scale and at pace. But the amazing thing with it is that it happens organically, right? And so
Hmm.
when you think about M&A, you think about partnerships, all that's all inorganic growth, right?
Right.
Composable applications gives you a means to organically grow. So you're not sacrificing the experience for your end users, right? You're really paying attention. You're really delivering value and exceptional experiences for them. And that's really kind of intriguing for me. And in terms of the role that composable applications builds or brings to the
See if
conversation.
any of these
So
prognostications, these predictions come true.
yeah, I'm cheating a little bit in the sense that, I mean, there's breadcrumbs that have been laid out, right? These are things
Mhm.
that you're seeing a little bit in we saw it a little bit in 2023. There's alerts and signals to suggest that this is going to be something we see in 2024 and beyond. So they're not bold predictions, but I think that they're ones that,
Right? I'd rather take accurate than bold.
yeah, I'm
Well,
sitting on pins and needles the same way. Let's see if these come to fruition.
we should take an office pool to see if this happens.
Yeah,
So let me wrap it up. I uh, I obviously appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us for our 2024 predictions podcast. You've been listening to Eric Embir, who is our chief prognosticator. I'm giving you that official
I
title
appreciate it.
now. You're going to have business cards made up with that title on you.
I'll take it.
I'll be the director of mirth and merriment. You be the official prognosticator. So thank you for joining us for our podcast series, and yeah, thank you so much for your time, Eric.
I appreciate it. Straight to the LinkedIn profile. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Have a good one, Jason.
thank you. You too.